Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Susan George, and I am the co-chair of our selection committee. And I also have here tonight Dr. Wendy Dragon and Dr. Gojay Gun. We're going to be going over the graduate application, specifically to PsyD programs. We will be taking questions in the chat, and at the end, we'll leave time for a Q&A. But we want to go over just different aspects of the application process. There we go. So the purpose and goals for tonight is that we want to increase your understanding of the application process. It can be daunting, it's a big ask, and there are a lot of different components. And so we want to equip you with how to also create a strong impression through your application materials. How do you impress upon those that are reading your materials, and then also through the interview, your skill sets, your unique talents and abilities, and how do you essentially, just shine throughout this process. A couple of things before we go into the other parts of it. I just wanted to go over test scores and grades. We often get asked about the GREs. And so for the School of Professional Psychology, we just wanted to note that we do need the general GRE scores and then the psych GREs if you did not major in psychology. In terms of some of our averages, I took the average of like the past 2 years. And so the average quantitative was about 30th percentile, and then the average verbal was about 60th percentile. We are also looking for a GPA of a 3.0, and the average for our incoming students over the last 2 years was a 3.6. And essentially, we're looking for evidence that you can complete doctoral level work. I often tell people that the doctoral program is it's a beast. I remember like doing my bachelor's in biochem, I did my master's in social work, and I went to go get my PsyD. And during my master's, I was working full-time, going to school full-time, doing my practicum, and it was challenging, yes, but I just remember going to the doctoral program and just like, I was like, oh, this is way harder. And a lot more than I had, I think, initially expected. And so another thing in terms of like grades and the GRE scores, we want to encourage you to order these ahead of time, and especially make sure that you're sending them to PsyCast and not Wright State. It's a common mistake that we get every year. Just like a handful of people that end up sending their scores to Wright State University. For our program, we solely use PsyCast, so we don't take in any of that information. So all of that needs to be sent over to PsyCast. Another tip that we want to just remind you of too is to follow up with PsyCast to ensure that the information has been uploaded and verified. We also have sometimes a good number of students or applicants that are submitting their materials, but we haven't received their official GRE scores or their official transcripts. And so this sometimes requires a call from you to get those uploaded and moved along. Unfortunately, Wright State and any of the other schools that you apply to, we don't have any control over that. And so we want to encourage you to keep an eye on those things. Your transcripts, your GRE scores, your letters of recommendation as well. Sometimes we have and I've had to email a number of applicants just like, this past year where they had submitted 3 names and email addresses, and they have 2 that are submitted. We're waiting for the 3rd, and the professor accepted and said that they would write a letter, but they never submitted anything. And so that also holds up your application. And so again, during the process, we encourage you to just keep checking your materials and making sure that they're all there, because again, us as a program, we can't do anything. You need to kind of go ahead and do that piece. So I want to pass this over to Dr. Dragon, who's going to be talking about the CV.
Okay, so your CV or your curriculum vitae is a lot like a resume if you haven't already created one. Really, it is a summary of kind of all of the things that you've done that are relevant to the program. So you don't have to necessarily put in there that you worked at an ice cream stand when you were 16, but there may be times and places where you would say something like that, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. So you want to think about, if it's earlier in your process, you want to think about what can actually strengthen your CV. So that might be research opportunities. So finding opportunities in, a lab, even if it's not a lab that you are really deeply interested in, just to show that you can kind of put the time in, put the work in, that you can, that you're organized with your materials. Sometimes that also relates to getting an opportunity to do some writing or doing some presenting. That's always a bonus and a plus. So those are the kinds of things that you're going to want with research opportunities. Now, in our program, that's always a bonus, but not a requirement that you have multiple research opportunities. It is icing on the cake and it can be helpful. But we really are looking for is some kind of experience that shows that you have some interest in the field of psychology. So thinking about opportunities for volunteering. Have you volunteered at a crisis line? Have you volunteered at a, even at a soup kitchen? Have you volunteered in a place where, maybe we're volunteered at a nursing home, transporting people? Wherever you're, kind of volunteering, getting those opportunities to interact with people. Sometimes that can be more directly related to psychology. Sometimes it's a little less, but always can be beneficial. And with all of these things, one of the things I want you to be thinking about is how do you organize and kind of convey what you've done or experienced in this setting to on your CV to the people that you want to go work with. So, you say, remember I said ice cream stand. We're not interested in the ice cream stand. But if you were maybe made manager at that ice cream stand and you were working with and responsible for helping others to manage certain tasks, that might be something that would be beneficial, because then we understand that you have leadership qualities, that you are seen as being socially skilled, that right. So you're always thinking about the experiences you have. How do I kind of convey what I've learned at this experience that would be beneficial to become, in kind of the process of being a psychologist, right? So always be thinking about that. And whenever in doubt, I always say, go find people who've already been through the process and start asking questions, because they can often help to direct you. If you've had posters and other publications or experiences, you definitely want to put that on your CV. If you don't have them, again, it's not an automatic, you're not going to get in without those things. But the more of these different and varied experiences you have, the more you're creating a picture. And that's what I really kind of encourage people to think about as you're creating your application materials, is you're creating a picture of a person that we want. Somebody who's a little bit of a go-getter, someone that's created opportunities for themselves and different experiences for themselves to make them a more rounded student. Not someone who's just been in the classroom, but has kind of worked around the edges to find areas of opportunity and growth. So posters and other publications, again, can be a real benefit there. Leadership experiences, again, can be within psychology, can be without psychology, but again, gives us a good understanding. Remember, psychologists, as a rule, have really strong social skills, particularly for a program like this, where we're a practitioner model. We are definitely looking that you have those social skills. So things like leadership experience may be a real opportunity for us to say, oh, you've been promoted in a field. Other people have seen your ability to work with others and have found that to be exceptional in some way. Another thing to think about as you're kind of maybe preparing your materials is think about what groups can you get involved with that, first of all, can be very helpful. We'll talk about that a little bit in a minute, but also can show that you have an interest in being professionally engaged in the field. So think about things like PsyD. Can be very beneficial. Shows that you have an interest. Also, there's a GPA kind of requirement there, so it also is another way to say, hey, look at me, I have this, I have this level of GPA. But even something like a psychology club, which often doesn't have that, at least you're showing interest and kind of moving forward and trying to find opportunities. Another thing with these kinds of professional engagement experiences is you're going to have more opportunity to connect with other people who are also looking to go to grad school. And so you're going to have an opportunity to speak with them and kind of work back and forth with them and maybe even swap materials. Would you look at my essay? I'll look at your essay, kind of things, which can be just really, really useful. And again, you're developing a picture. And so is that you've written this out, does somebody else see the picture that you're trying to convey? So professional engagement looks good on your CV, but also can be really beneficial in kind of building your professional, burgeoning professional identity. I've already kind of talked about opportunities to volunteer. You'd be surprised at how many opportunities there are to volunteer in the area. And so if you don't have opportunities already kind of laid out for you, again, start talking to people. Like, this can be where networking can be very beneficial, and even a small opportunity can grow into a large one. So, but you definitely, if you've had opportunities to volunteer, you want to put those in there. And if you haven't had an opportunity to volunteer and you have time, you're not necessarily looking for this cycle, then you want to go and broach those opportunities. And I've already kind of talked throughout, like, how do you highlight the work that you've already done and make sure that that's shining through on your CV. Finally, a couple things that are not on here, but I would just want to highlight to you is we have a very limited, as we're assessing you and looking at your materials and thinking about, are you the good fit that we want to have in our program? We have only a limited number of ways we can look at you. And so we look at the ways that we have with a lot of scrutiny. So CVs that are poorly formatted, lots of typos, lots of discontinuities, not very detailed about what's happening, are going to be CVs that we think, oh, maybe this person isn't all that interested. They've not taken time to go through and proof their materials. Right. So that when you create something like this, you want to, first of all, give yourself plenty of time, create it, go back, review it, reorganize it, and then have somebody else look at it. Because you don't want to be looking unprofessional and like you don't care when you're kind of turning that material in. I would like to just take a second here to ask Dr. George and Dr. Ergun if there was anything that came up for them that they thought that should be added as I was talking about the CV process. No? Okay. And the next one is the essays. This is mine too as well, Dr. George? Yes, I thought so. I just want to make sure and I'm not, overstaying my welcome. We have two essays that you're required to do. We have an autobiographical essay that you'll be asked to do, and also a diversity essay. And you don't want to submit for either of these a generic essay. That really negatively impacts your overall application. Remember what I said, we have a limited number of things that we can evaluate, whether you're a good fit with us. If you're turning in a generic essay, we're going to think, well, are you interested? Have you really thought through who we are as a program and what we stand for? Have you really thought through and been reflective of your own standing with what we're asking? So really kind of think through, and this is probably the part of the materials that takes the most thought. And so you really want to be starting your essay early, working on it. It can be very difficult to write about yourself. And so you don't want to leave this to the last minute. Also, this is another area where getting other people to review it and give you feedback on it can be very, very, very beneficial. With regards to specifically the diversity essay prompt, it is a very specific prompt and it's asking for very specific things. And you want to make sure that you address all of those aspects. We as a program are very, very interested in, and we're very, very devoted to social justice and inclusion. And so we developed this prompt in order to try to see kind of where you are in your process of that. And so if you've missed pieces of that prompt, then it's going to be harder to evaluate you. And so we can only take so many folks, and so you kind of slip down the hierarchy a little bit when we're not quite as sure if you're a good fit for our program. So always try to make sure you answer kind of all that's being asked. I think You want to make sure, I've already kind of started talking about details. Detail orientation is really important throughout your packet of materials, but make sure that you're writing the essay to the people you think you are, saying that you're really, really, submitting an essay to Wright State University, saying you're really, really excited to go to Xavier University is going to leave it, are you, maybe you are, and you're just letting us know that you're really excited about Xavier, but that's not necessarily helpful to us in our decision making. And Xavier doesn't know. We don't share that with them, so it doesn't even help you there. So just kind of make sure that you know exactly who you're talking to. Grammar and spell check I've already spoken to, and I've already talked about reviewing your materials. Again, a lot of it is around creating a picture of who you are, a snapshot in time. So take your time, think about what is it that makes you, for example, you write a biographical essay, what makes you a good fit for our program, and what makes you, show your passion, show your strengths, and that will shine through, and we will be excited to invite you.
Thank you, Dr. Dragon. We're going to go over to recommendation letters. Dr. Argun.
All right, so I'll be talking about the recommendation letters. So we would like preferably 3 recommendation letters from doctoral level professionals. So that could be probably mostly, from your professors that, from undergraduate, if you have been to a master's program, from the master's program, because they would be able to speak to your academic standing and how you did in the classroom environment. And of course, we would like to know how you did in an academic setting, because we'd like to know then how it's going to fare well in our doctoral level academic setting. So we would recommend that you pick someone who knows you well. I think that's really important. We really encourage you to, if you're like in the earlier stages, like if you're not applying maybe just now, but if you're planning on that, to develop some good relationships with your professors, and to kind of like, I don't want to say necessarily just stand out, but just like have that relationship. If you're working in their lab, if you're working on a research project, just maybe a presentation, try to get to know them, they get to know you. So in that sense, they'll be able to write you a stronger letter, because they will have more observations of you. They will have things to say about you. Because sometimes, and we have, I think, all been there, we get letters and they are just one paragraph. It'll say like, you work with this person and a few nice things, but it just tells us. And then we get these letters that are like 2 pages long, so detailed, so many interactions and so forth. So that's of course more helpful than this one paragraph. So that one paragraph makes us think that maybe either you didn't stand out, or you really didn't do a whole lot of, with this person. Maybe this wasn't the best person to write you a letter to begin with. So, I think hopefully I made that connection clear. Like the more you spend time with that specific person, and then you get involved with them in their activities, then the more observations that they have, and then the more they'll be able to write about you, which will convey us that, all of those qualities that we don't know, but we would like to know through your letter writer. So for recommenders outside of the school, so I mean, as I said, your university where you graduated or are currently still in, either undergraduate or master's would be wonderful. But if you, let's say you graduated and you were in the field and now you're wanting to go back to school, which, we, of course, that's wonderful, that you'd like to, pursue this again. And so then it could be from someone who has supervised your work or your volunteer activities. Let's say you're working in the field and that is your supervisor or a manager, a volunteer experience. So any of those things in the field that can speak to your professional activities, your professionalism, maybe how you dealt with clients, whether you were reliable, whether, how your time management was. So all of those professional skills that you display, hopefully that they will be able to talk about. So, and that's sometimes kind of also nice as far as having that balance between someone talking about your academic performance and then someone talking about if you had that experience, like your professional experience. So we kind of like to put those together and say like, now I get a really good picture of this person in both of those contexts. So we have a no-no that we really wanted to emphasize. Please do not submit recommendation letters from your psychologist, your therapist, your psychiatrist, doctor, your aunt and uncle who could be a psychologist. Believe me, I've had some requests because I'm a professor to write about some of my, friends' children, and I say, well, first of all, I can't do that, but second of all, I also haven't worked with this, person. Just because I'm a professor or a psychologist does not mean that I can automatically just write a generic letter. I should have worked with that person personally. So, and believe me, yes, we have gotten those type of letters, and they do not provide that information that we need. So please be mindful of that and try to pick someone else who could talk about you. The next point is when we say strong letter, that means a strong letter. That is a real thing. So try to ask from those who will write you a strong letter and who have things to say about your skills, personality, and work ethic, because we do evaluate all of those specifically. It is okay when you interact, when you ask the person whether they can write you a strong letter. So in terms of asking the letter, and I go through this even with my graduate, students, doctoral level students, when they're asking for letters for internship, and I talk about this process. So first of all, give the person that you're going to be asking a letter ample time. That's very important. Please do not ask 2 weeks before it's due. No one can put together a meaningful and a strong letter within that short of time. Everyone is so busy. Give them ample time. And then first, it's very professional and nice to ask the person and say, would you be able to, I'm applying to doctoral level programs, would you be able to write me a strong letter? And first get their response. And if they say yes, then say, what would you need from me? And then have these ready, your latest finalized edited CV that Dr. Dragan has talked about. And then it would be nice to have one document where you kind of like list, it could be like bullet points, but list all the activities that you have done with this person and when, kind of like a nice timeline, because we can all forget, like you worked with this person 3 years ago, you want to remind them, like when you worked, you can say, I worked in your lab, we did this presentation together in 2020, and then we did this, I was in your lab, I was your TA, and we did this together. So it's kind of like nice, and it kind of helps them to remember some of those details about yourself if it's been kind of like a little bit in the past. Even if it's been current, it helps because most of the times professors have lots of students to write letters for. So, so I kind of mentioned that part. And then if there is some experience that you have had with this letter writer that you feel like it would be really helpful or you would like them to emphasize, it is okay to put in that document that you're going to send them. You could say, these were some of the things that I would appreciate, or it would be helpful if you could mention. And of course, when I get those requests or just like those in there, I always have the conversation say, of course, thanks for including those in, I will consider. And then, of course, and we also write what we want and what we observe. But it is okay without being too pushy to include those in so that they could say, yes, that's a valid point. That's what this person had. Let me put that in there too. So there is really nothing wrong with wanting things to be emphasized in a way that is also appropriate and professional. So also, again, checking with Dr. Dragan, Dr. George about any other points that we wanted to relay. All right. So next part is interview. Now you passed through all the paperwork and application and you got that exciting phone call saying that you're invited for an interview. And so how are we going to get ready for this important part? Because it is a very important piece. You could be very strong in your paper applications, but we also want to see that you are as equally strong interpersonally while you are interacting with us when we do our interviews. So we wanted to give you some tips that so that you prepare strongly as well. So the first part is don't assume, which is being prepared to talk about anything about yourself and your experiences. I wanted to give a specific example from mine when I did my internship interviews. I had some experiences working as a volunteer psychologist back in my own country, doing some trauma work with earthquake survivors. But after I came to US, I did not pursue further trauma, but I went into neurodevelopmental disabilities and so forth, and then lots of work around that. And then one interviewer picked that part of my CV and asked that question. Of course, I knew that experience, but I wasn't as ready to delve into that and talk about that experience. So it kind of like caught me off guard. So make sure you know all parts of your CV, everything that you've done, and being kind of like really ready to talk about some of the details, because you never know what someone would be interested in and what they would ask to you. Next piece is being open and sincere rather than defensive. We evaluate professionalism, we evaluate interpersonal interactions. And then one of the things that we value is being genuine, yourself, being open to the process, seeing that as a kind of a learning experience both ways, and kind of like putting yourself kind of like out there. Sometimes there will be some questions maybe that are a bit challenging for you. So again, not being defensive, but maybe taking those as like, well, I haven't really thought about that. That never came to my mind, but let me think, and then kind of like try to give you an answer. So that's more genuine than trying to kind of like protect or kind of like defend yourself, because we're not there to attack. We're not there to, put you on the stand. It's more about we're trying to kind of like see, where you stand on certain, areas or questions. But while doing that, also try to maintain your professionalism. So the way you address, for example, faculty, if they would like to be addressed as like Dr. George and so forth with their pronouns, we always ask those, then please also follow those rules as well in being professional in how you address. Like if it's a virtual interview, when you come into the room, make sure to address everyone saying hi and doing greetings and things like that, and doing the small talk and things like that. So being open and sincere, but at the same time maintaining that professionalism as well. This third one is, I think, very important: doing your research about the program, faculty, and knowing the school. Sometimes we get the sense that we are more one of a more generic program, that we feel that maybe you haven't read as much about our program. So please make sure to read about our mission statement of each of the programs that you're applying. The general structure of the program, and then some specifics regarding, how many practicums there are, as well as like maybe some things about the faculty, what they're focusing on, is there like emphasis programs, specific programs in the general program, is a generalist, making sure it's a PsyD, PhD, and so forth. So kind of like all of these details are very important. Sometimes we see that you put those in your essays, but when we ask you, why specifically you're interested in our program, sometimes it's hard to get those answers. So we want to make sure that you read through the material and there was something that excited you, that's maybe why you're here, or that's where your mind is. So we'd like to be able to see that you put enough effort to research our program. Being confident and sharing what sets you apart. So please make sure to think about your own strengths. So that could be your academic strengths, clinical strengths, as well as your academics and clinical areas of growth, as well as your professional strengths and areas of growth. So what would set you apart? That why should we want you? And then, what do you think that you'll bring to our program? So those type of things, just making sure that from your own point of view, and then important piece is how are you going to relay those to us in that confident way. Eye contact, I think we put it in there because sometimes we it could be out of anxiety. It's a different and new situation, and you have a couple interviewers that you're interviewing. So make sure that you make eye contact with your interviewers, and if you have more than one person, just making sure that you vary your eye contact, and then you can address the questions and you can address everyone in the room, whether it's a virtual room or in person. So that's very important because that's a way to connect with your interviewer, and we'd like to be connected. Providing thoughtful responses and giving examples. We have, some set of questions that we ask. Of course, giving those concise responses and giving responses that are catering to the question. But sometimes it's good to add some extra information, expand on your responses, and giving some specific examples that we might not have asked, but you just want to give us some examples. And that's our way to get to know you. Otherwise, all we see is like what you're in the CV, and we're bound with that. So if you could expand on those responses with those, that would be helpful. Of course, being mindful of your attire. It's a professional relationship there in a setting. So making sure that you have that formal attire where you can still express yourself and be yourself, but at the same time making sure that it is appropriate to the environment. Being aware of how responsive are your answers. We are looking for that you also show your enthusiasm, your passion, your interest in the program, and your answers should hopefully would reflect those as well. And when we say responsive, also wanted to point out that we would like to make sure that you can reflect what you want, and then it's not like we understand that sometimes you might be maybe anxious and maybe a little bit on the quiet side. That's okay. We understand that. We've all gone through that process. But when we try to engage you, making sure that after maybe a certain level that you would be able to engage and connect with us, because this is also a profession, and what we're looking for is potential students who can engage with their clients later on, and who can engage with us as faculty in the program to go through this whole 4 or 5 years. And finally, make sure to have some questions prepared for us. We'd love to answer all your questions. And it also shows us that you have done your research, but you weren't able to find answers to certain things. Maybe our website wasn't complete, or you didn't see that information. So we'd love to fill you in and make sure that it is both ways. We are interviewing you, but you're also kind of like making an informed decision as to where you would like to spend your next 4 or 5 years. So those questions will help you to maybe set our program aside from other programs. So we'd love to respond to those questions. So that's all about the interview process.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Argun. So we're gonna, we have like about 10-15 minutes left. I'm going to stop the share, and this is an opportunity for you to ask us questions, clarify things that we may have said. And so you may type into the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask.
Hi, hi, this is Laura. Thank you so much. This has been very informative. I have a clarification just on research and also the CV in general. What is the timeline for knowing someone like a doctor or professional that you would like to see? And the same question with being able to get in research, like would 6 months make a difference, or would you say longer?
I think when you have those longer relationships, that shows something. So that's definitely a benefit. But I think even 6 months is something. It shows that you've gone out there, you've taken the time, you've taken the energy, and you've tried to put forth your best effort in something. And maybe it was an experience that only lasted 6 months. I remember back to my own experience, there were things that were bound by it was done as a semester opportunity. And so, we're aware that there are limitations to opportunities as well. So I don't think if it's a 6-month opportunity, even a 4-month opportunity, I think it would be beneficial to put in there. And obviously, if you can build those longer relationships, that's great. But sometimes that's just not possible.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Destiny wrote a question in the chat. She writes, I've been transferring from different schools due to COVID. I haven't been really able to get to know my professors. Most of my classes have been transferred to being online. Who should I go to for letters or recommendations, since professors seem to be a difficulty?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I do think that even in a professional, in an online space, you can kind of make sure that you stand out a little bit. You know, being active even in the online space, making sure you're asking questions, answering questions when things are asked from the professor. I teach online some, you know, and it feels sometimes like shouting into the void. So the people who speak up in my class, I remember them, and you know, and I come to value what they have to bring to that class. So I think even in an online space you can set yourself apart. You may have to rely a little bit more on volunteer opportunities and other opportunities to get those letters, but I really like to see at least one professor, because you know, remember, this is a doctoral program, and one of the things we're evaluating is your ability to, will you be able to matriculate through the program? Will you be able to graduate? And so getting that information from a peer of ours, a colleague of ours, can be very, very beneficial.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. While we strongly suggest that you have, you know, recommendation letters from 3 different doctoral professionals, we know that, again, COVID and just maybe your circumstances, that is not possible. And again, too, I just want to reiterate, you know, what Wendy had said about, you know, unfortunately, someone at the master's level can't speak to like doctoral level work. And kind of why I had said in the beginning, when I went from my master's program into my doctoral program, the doctoral program was just a completely different beast, to be honest. And so we need someone to speak to that. There's another question. What pathways have people taken between undergraduate and your program?
Many things, right?
Yes.
Yeah. How much time do you have? Uh, we've had a couple folks who applied to our program as a second career who were like lawyers. We've had folks who were teachers. We've had just a wide array of folks. I think there are a lot of pathways. So, and we value that. I mean, I actually like working with folks who have had different and varied experiences. I think they bring that into their coursework and into the classroom, and can share those experiences. I think that, you know, when you've gone and had maybe that little different asynchronous journey, that then when you're sitting with a client, you know, you might experience them a little differently than if you know, you'd gone straight from undergrad to grad school. So yeah.
Yeah, just some examples I could give, like maybe from my own students. I'm in the child emphasis program, and some of the students that we had in our program, they worked as did like some ABA therapy, and worked in some of them worked in residential settings, providing that. Some of them, and I have some students who worked as a research assistant, as like a, you know, full-time job. And they had some experience maybe with some of the measures, like psychological measures. We had some folks who worked as psychometricians and did some testing, and both, you know, earned money as well as some good, you know, clinical experience. But, you know, as Dr. Dragon mentioned, there are also some who have taken time to raise families and or take care of loved ones. So we've got a lot of different pathways. I think as long as we see some of the areas that Dr. Dragon kind of like talked about, that even during those timelines, there were some activities that were done that kind of like showcases to us that they have been engaged and involved in the professional world. You know, then it's okay that people have taken different pathways. So there is really not one that we say like, oh, we value this much more than the other. Everyone's experience and background is very unique. And I think we really appreciate everyone's contribution when they come into the program.
Thank you. Another question that we have is, for PhDs, I've been told that it's a best practice to reach out to advisors prior to applying to introduce yourself. Is that helpful for a PsyD as well before applying?
So I just want a clarification to people you think you might work with. Is that the question?
Hi, yeah. I guess just the doctors I'll be working with, or advisors or faculty.
Okay. Well, I think, different programs operate differently. Came from a PhD program, and I really applied to work directly with a particular person who became my advisor. In the PsyD world, you apply to be part of the school, and you get assigned a first year advisor, and then you go around and meet everyone, and you develop that relationship, and then you become their advisee. And that doesn't mean that we've not had people came in, they knew exactly who they wanted to work with, and they were assigned to that person day one, and they worked with them the whole time. But it's not as big of a requisite here as it is in the PhD program, where if you don't fit with that particular one advisor that you want to work with, and you're just not going to get into that program, that's not really how we operate here. As far as reaching out, I think that's fine. I don't mind when prospective students reach out, and maybe they have a question specifically of me. Am I taking students they are interested in working with me, or am I still working in XYZ? And I'm like, no, I'm not really doing that. And then they can be like, okay, that's that can help them to make different decisions about whether I'm a good fit if they want to work directly with me. So
I'll say too that sometimes when we get application materials, we'll have students that will indicate in one of their essays that they are really interested in working with a specific faculty member. And so for our selection committee who takes the applicants through the process, we do take that into consideration when we are then setting up an interview. We try to match you. We can't promise, but we try to match you with maybe, let's say you did want to work with Dr. Dragon, we'll try to match you with her for an interview. So we do take some of those into consideration. Again, we can't promise anything, but we'll try. This next question is, I'm also wondering when the application for the incoming class of the fall of 23 would be due. So our applications are typically due the Monday before Thanksgiving. So for the class of 2023, that'll be Monday, November 21st, 2022. And the application portal in PsyCast will open up typically the second week in September. Other questions you all may have?
Hi, this is Ryan. Just one question. Really helpful. Thank you all for presenting. For the application, is it completely done through PsyCast? Is there anything on the Wright State site that you need to log into and do a concurrent application?
No, all the application materials will go right to PsyCast. So all of your transcripts, GRE scores, essays, recommendation letter, that'll be completely done through PsyCast.
Okay, and then there's a, so do the payment for PsyCast and then it's just a payment on Wright State, but no other application for Wright State. Okay.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, all application materials PsyCast, but then there is a fee through SOPP.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, Susan, did you say that you were a biochemistry major?
Yes.
How did you choose this pathway? Because that's also my major.
Oh, really? Well, I was planning on going to med school, and long story short, during my undergrad years, I was working at on the children's floor of a pediatric floor for our local hospital, and had come across a child that was failure to thrive, and was also, there's a dispute between the parents, and there are also accusations of potential sexual abuse, and that kind of got me interested in well, what happened? I knew nothing about the foster care system, FYI. So I was like, you don't hear about orphanages anymore. Where do these kids go? And so that landed me actually at a local residential program for kids between the ages of 5 and 13 that were, abused and been removed from the home. And so I got a job there, just kind of applied on the whim, and figured I'd do something on the side, on the weekends or something, just to get some experience, but ended up working years later, like I became a supervisor of the group home, and that's kind of what led me down to social work, and love my social work degree, but felt that I was like hitting a ceiling, and also was really interested in assessments. And so that's what kind of then took me to the PsyD route.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Other questions we can answer for you tonight? Okay, well, thank you all for coming out. I'll send you all just a copy of the PowerPoint later tonight. And thank you for taking the time. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Take care.